Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Tesseract program, the Tesseract program. Today we're going to be speaking with Rich Hoffman. Rich Hoffman has 60 years of UFO research experience, and we're excited to have him come on to the show. So, Rich Hoffman is a recognized leader in the scientific study of unidentified aerial phenomenon, and he's a sought after speaker on the topic of advancing UAP research through coordinated and data driven approaches. Welcome to Tesseract, Rich. I hope you're having a great week. Hope you had a good weekend, and we're excited to have you. Thanks for being here. Rich, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Let me hang on a second. Let me close out some other windows because I kept hearing myself. So the bottom line is I've been doing this for now. It's going to be 62 years as of April 24th this month that I got started with UFOs. I was in eighth grade science class and I had to do a 10-minute presentation on a topic that was on a list that the science teacher had passed around, and I was living in Dayton, Ohio at the time, and the only thing that nobody signed up for because I was late to class was UFOs, and so I put my name next to it. I had no idea what it was. I went up after class and I talked with my science teacher. I said, "Well, what's a UFO?" He said, "Unidentified flying object." I said, "Well, what's that?" Um, And the bottom line was that, so now he said, well, it's like, flying saucers or something like that. And I'm going like, okay, well, I'll look into that. Anyway, bottom line is I went and I did a lousy job of looking it up and trying to find out anything about it. And I got up and I bombed it, my 10-minute presentation. And I said, that there's really nothing to it. I think I might've picked up a book like My Trip to Venus or something like that. And so I got a D on the report. Went home that evening, and Walter Cronkite got on the news and was talking about uh, bottom line the Socorro, New Mexico case, which was where a Lonnie Zamora, a police officer out in New Mexico, Socorro, had been in pursuit of a speeding vehicle, and he hears an explosion. He goes over, checks it out, and it turns out it's an egg-shaped object that has tripod legs to it, and he sees two small beings walking around at the base of what looked like a ladder of some sort. And then, as he was going over this arroyo to be able to get out to where he could actually park and see the thing better, he then sees that the beings are gone and the object is now lifting up and gumming up and comes stationary, and then it shoots off over his head toward the city of Socorro, and other people saw it as well. And he had also contacted another policeman to come and to check it out. And anyway, it's a fascinating case. It was one of the ones that Project Blue Book, which was the Air Force project, had going on. And I heard that and I became extremely interested in what was going on, because there was actually like sagebrush that was burned, and there were footprints that were found, and the Air Force actually had also looked into it, and and they couldn't explain it and stuff like that. And so I'm now hooked. And I go to, a couple days later, my aunt was going to a bookstore and she invited me to go along, and I went and asked, and I said, "Do you have any books on UFOs?" And they said, "Yeah, there's one back here that you can take a look at. It's called The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects by the Captain Edward Ruppelt, the former head of Project Blue Book." And I'm reading it. And I'm reading, and the first sentence of the book is talking about a jet pursuit where they actually shot at the object over the DC area. And I was going like, wow, they're actually firing at him. And then I go on to read the fact that the Project Blue Book is located just up the street from me in Dayton, Ohio. And so suddenly I'm like hooked, and I'm becoming very interested in it. And I began collecting any kind of article, any kind of magazine, books I was reading to the nth degree, and I became obsessed with it. Then that was at age 13. When I was age 15, I am now going around giving lectures around the city of Dayton. And there was a newscaster by the name of Phil Donahue that got a hold of me, and I was now on TV talking about it. And suddenly I became the go-to guy for UFOs in the city of Dayton, Ohio. And that began my avocation, my hobby, if you would, that for the next 62 years that has kept me going. And that is that I became the lead for many organizations. I was the lead for Alabama and Mississippi as the state director for MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. I got hooked into them right in 1969, and they were called at that time the Midwest UFO Network. And so anyway, I started doing investigations and case investigations at a very early age, and we got hooked into 100 sightings a week during what they call flap periods, where there was a large concentration of sightings, and just became the go-to guy for UFOs. And like I said, in Ohio. Then when I moved later on, I moved over and eventually ended up down here in Alabama. I became the state director for Alabama and Mississippi, and then went on to become the deputy state director for all of MUFON. Did that for a period of years. And then in 2017, we created an organization called the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, and we now have over 400 scientists on board in that organization who are all basically helping to write papers, getting papers published in journals. We're holding yearly conferences and stuff like that. This year, the conference is going to be up in Toronto, Canada. And we've invited all of the big name people in the UFO field to present. And of course, I know most all of them over my 62 years. But bottom line is that I've been entrenched in the UFO subject, now UAP subject, I guess, if you would, for that length of time. In 2022, I represented the United States over in Bologna, Italy, working with the Defense Department to be able to go and present to NATO, along with a guy named Ryan Graves, who was the pilot who was saw him for 2 years on his missions and stuff like that off the East Coast. And anyway, I began briefing NATO on the subject to get them up to speed. And now we're working with the state of Vermont for doing investigations with that state. There's other states that are now becoming interested in getting their own activity in terms of researching them. I'm connected with ARA, which is the an all-domain anomalous research resolution office at the Pentagon, up at the Pentagon, and so we're keeping in close contact with them. I'm also engaging with a lot of the politicians. I'm also holding a lot of events where we're trying to get technology people engaged. I just did, at the beginning of February, we had a worldwide conference where we actually brought all of the technologists from around the world together, and they talked about what they're doing in terms of creating systems to go out and collect data. And we're trying to I'm trying to organize all that and get that going with a lot of key people, and we're making great headway on that. And that will feed the data that we need to be able to go into scientific reviews and actually start to learn something about the subject. Anyway, I'm sure that that's a long-winded version of what I'm supposed to be telling you about, but if you want to go any further, I can go further.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I got some questions already just off of what you've shared so far. But my main question is, how does your work as the senior systems engineer analyst at the U.S. Army Material Command, Marshall Command headquarters at Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama, overlap with your expertise in UFOs?
Well, jokingly, they call me the command ufologist, And secondly, it's always been an interest. I've never hid my whole cube at the time. And by the way, I'm retired now. I retired this last September from that work. So
Congratulations.
thank you. And I'm not working with them anymore, but I was with them for 30 years working at the Army Material Command headquarters. And this is, 4-star command. And bottom line was my cube was decked out with all kind of the UFO paraphernalia. I never hid it at all. My job had nothing to do with UAP or UFOs, although I had access to secret networks and things like that I could, and do my own stuff. But I had, because I was so open out with that whole topic and stuff like that, and they all knew that I was and stuff like that. They A lot of people would come up and would interact with me and tell me their stories that they had when they were working, either at a base or something of that nature, or working in some capacity. And so a lot of people came up to me over the period of time, told me their stories, and and I would listen to what they had to say. And obviously many of these things were from the past. Like, a guy would tell me, well, we were doing an exercise down in Mississippi, and we had weapons firing going on and everything else, and above us was a triangular shaped object that was hovering, watching the whole kind of thing going on. And I'm going like, wow, that's pretty incredible. Can you tell me more? And they would fill me in on that kind of detail. In addition to that, they were always, coming up and asking me about what I thought about this case or that case, or what did you think about the Pentagon coming out with the program called OSAP and ATIP, and so I would get a lot of questions like that coming from a lot of different people. And then in the position that I had, there were things we call them taskers. And so the headquarters of the Army will send down maybe a congressional tasker, or and all the commands are supposed to do something with that, right? So good example of one tasker that I dealt with the UAPs was that, because I was also the task manager, Bubba, that I would task these subordinate commands to AMC with giving information up. But occasionally I'd bump into one that was UAP related, and one of them was the national NARA. It's the Archives and Records Administration, and they're required to have all these records, available for people. And NARA is put out a tasker throughout the entire Army, directing them to basically report any material or any kind of material, and also documents that they had over to to NARA. And so I got the tasker, sent it out, and told people that they're supposed to reply back with any information that they have on it. And there's 90,000 people in Army Material Command, and they're like all over the world. And the big Zippo came in from nobody saying that they had anything, no records and stuff like that. And and I said, well, okay, well, bottom line is that most of the military's work is not related to UFOs at all, or UAP, and so it kind of makes sense that maybe the Army might not have anything. But again, it's like you would expect to see something out there. And then even on the networks that I would be on, where I'd be on a classified network or something like that, I could spot, like the Air Force, for example, had a site where they were posting videos and things like that were being fed over into to the Aero program. And but the Army never ever engaged. It was never a topic that was mentioned on any really thing.
What about the
at
Navy?
all on the Well, the Navy was a bit more open, because they're, in fact, that's why we know about the Nimitz case. That's why we know about the Ryan Graves stuff and stuff like that, because the Navy has a little bit, been way more open. And of course, they're experiencing these things out in the ocean over our exercise areas. And so when you have something going on like, the Nimitz case, where you've got an object that's doing incredible maneuvers like Mach 50 and above, and by the way, that's 5 times the speed of sound. And if you take a look at Artemis 2, when it came in, it was coming in at Mach 35. Well, these objects are going Mach 50 and above, and they're not burning up in the atmosphere and moving at those speeds. Anyway, the bottom line was that, when you have that kind of thing going on, and they were a lot more open about it. Although there's still stigmas, there's some commanders that try to squelch the topic and keep it quiet, and so with having a stigma and the fact that it's been a long time change for the government, that's not going to happen overnight. That you're going to suddenly get pilots that are going to feel comfortable about talking about what they're experiencing or something like that. But the fact that you have some official collection agency lends credence to it, and it gives you some sort of legs to stand on, right? So, what we experienced with my early period of life with Project Blue Book, well, Project Blue Book had the University of Colorado to do a 2-year study that was going to be a pre-concluded, that it was going to be a whitewash. It was basically going to educate the public that there's nothing to this. And it did that job effectively because it stopped communication and any kind of research after that, when the National Academy of Sciences blessed the Condon report that says that there was nothing to it, there's no threat to anybody, and don't even accept people doing research on it. Well, that created what I call the Dark Ages. And the Dark Ages lasted until 2017, when you finally had that announcement in the New York Times about the fact that there was a program called OSAP and ATIP, and those 3 videos were released. But nobody dealt with any subject, and again, it was just taboo to even bring it up.
Can I ask you something that's a little obscure?
Yeah.
So what's your take on that Tic Tac video? Do you think that it's a reverse engineered human made craft, or do you think it's alien?
Okay, so let me, first off, I don't know if you know about the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, but we actually investigated that case and talked to about 18 different people.
I heard you did a 100-page report on it.
It's a 277-page report on it.
Yeah.
And
I would love to hear your take on this.
Yeah, and so, we had physicists that looked at the speeds. We were able to determine the speed of the drop of the object from roughly 20,000 feet to stopping above the water in less than 1 second. That before I said one, it had already gone down 20,000 feet and stopped. So in 0.78 of a second, when we analyzed that in speed, and that speed would be above Mach 50, or in other words, 48, maybe I think it was 48,000 miles per hour. So, and it didn't heat up. There was no kinetic release or anything like that of energy. If it doesn't heat up in the atmosphere, and I just cut through telling you that the Artemis 2, when it came in, was going Mach 35, and it heated up in the atmosphere, and you had all that burning and stuff like that. Well, the atmosphere is notorious when you're going, at hypersonic speeds, that you're going to end up creating heating in the atmosphere, and the object would heat up. Well, these objects are cold. They don't heat up, and they don't have any propulsion systems that you obviously see on them, and yet they're able to do this kind of incredible speed and everything else. And so our report goes into the level of detail of that, plus the video, and we measured the speed of the object and the distance of the object, and we found out that even in the video, it was going at Mach 50 when it shoots off. And and it also it affected the camera and stuff, the at flare that was attached to it, telling it that basically there was some sort of electromagnetic interference that was going on with the object when they were doing it, the filming of it. And at 3 different times, we looked at the speed measurements, and they were all individually, for example, when the object left Commander Fravor and then shot off, it went to his cap point in a matter of just seconds or something like that, and it ended up going 60 miles away and going to this cap point, which is basically it's a secret rendezvous spot that Fravor, after the exercise, was supposed to go to. Anyway, so
yeah,
it was there.
I was going to ask you about that next. It's almost as if it had precognition.
Yeah, so there's what we experience with the phenomena is that you can sometimes have these indications that it has some sort of a precognitive kind of an element to it. it kind of like knows what it either knows what's going to happen next. And it's, if you think about these things, going back to you're wanting to make it alien. Uh, First off, we don't go with alien because we don't even know if it's a time machine and we're looking at us coming back from the future. And would you call yourself an alien? No. So the bottom line
I
was
love that
that,
answer. Sorry to cut you off. I
so
love that answer though.
so if we're dealing with time machines coming back from the future and these are beings, and if you think about the beings, what the descriptions of beings are that they got 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 hands, and 2 legs. So I mean, they're very much humanoid and bipedal like us, and we're the only creatures on the planet Earth that are bipedal. I mean, even the chimps and stuff like that walk on, on 4s from a period of time, and they're not always walking like we are on 2 legs. So, Michael Masters goes into his study. He's an anthropologist, and he looked at it and said, it's interesting that basically these things look humanoid. So are we dealing with us from the future coming back, and is that how they would know exactly what we're going to do? Because it's looking back at the history, is it more than that? Do they actually, are they having, if they've been on here on our planet as long as we believe that they have been in terms of any kind of research, you find out that they've been through every culture, and they probably can speak. Not that they speak with their mouth, but they're basically, they seem to be using telepathic kinds of things. But the person actually hears them in their own language, And so if you think about how many languages on this planet, they seemingly know all the languages because they're talking to people all over the planet. And, would they have a way of knowing our communication systems? Well, hell yes. They've had plenty of time to look at our communication systems and know how to do whatever they want to do with it, And
I
so that they would
totally
have
get
done
it.
that.
I love this
So, I
answer,
mean,
Rich. You were
uh,
awesome. Sorry to cut you off. Keep going.
no, that's all right. But I'm just trying to, these are kind of like the rational questions that I've had to deal with for 62 years, trying to figure out what makes sense out of this nonsense we deal with, right?
Totally.
And and what we see here is that a phenomena here where, I mean, they already know how to speak our language. They probably have connected into all our military channels and are listening to them if they can do that, and and they've got the capability of being able to interpret what we're going to do before we do it, and so that makes it a problem for us to be able to figure out, well, how do we go out and attack getting solutions to the problem? If I go set up cameras and I put in a nuclear thing down there and they have an interest in nuclear, well, if I set up a little honeypot where I'm going to attract them to that honeypot, which is the nuclear thing, and I've got cameras lined all the way around it, and they don't show up, does that mean that they knew about it? Yeah, they knew about that in advance, and so maybe they just don't bother to come. But anyway, you get what I'm going from. I'm just
Totally.
saying we just don't know what we don't know.
We don't know what we don't
and
know.
and until we can get technology or something applied to this, and that's only recently that we're able to do this kind of thing. If you look back even through the history, back in the days when I got started, well, I mean, I didn't have an iPhone. I didn't have, I mean, when I went out to do an investigation with people, and this is the same thing that the Air Force was doing, they would go out, they'd take colored pencils and have you, draw it or sketch it, what you saw, and, and then try to fill out some sort of a form. And then, then you go back and you try to figure it out, well, that's a poor way of doing anything. And, and then occasionally you'd have somebody that maybe have an El Cheapo camera, a box Brownie camera or a Polaroid, and you can't do anything with those. And, it's like, blurred objects, and so you're waiting to get something that's really clear because cameras hadn't even developed, and so, in my history of the 62 years, I've seen this technology change and advance to the point where now in the hands of us, we've got things like, sonar, radar, LiDAR, all these different kinds of devices. Our phones have got much better cameras now, and we can see things in other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum that we couldn't see before. And, and so suddenly we're able to start seeing things in sensors that help us to better understand that there's like more to them than just these blurred images you see on an El Cheapo camera, right?
Totally. I love the footage that is like the Gorgon stare whammy footage of the MH370 flight with the three spheres forming like perfect spiral formation, giving off cold energy with that advanced MQ-9 Reaper drone,
Yeah.
you know,
So yeah,
sensors on it. It's next level.
right. And so I'm on the TV I'm on the 6 seasons of the show called The Proof Is Out There on History Channel, and we just did the recent filming, for example, where I'm going to be on season 6 now, and I'm one of the experts that they go to after they show these videos and various other kinds of things, and and I try to point out to them that we've reached the point now where AI can be seen as being a helpful thing to us to study UFO videos, photos, and even cases, but it also is becoming a hindrance because now you got people that can create fake videos and fake this and that using AI that's making our research hellacious. I mean, I don't want to spend my time sitting around looking at something that's been created in somebody's computer or on that they've created with AI, and I'd rather be looking at the good cases where you've got good solid evidence and focusing on that. So anyway, I just thought I'd
Understood.
mention that it's a blessing and it's also a curse at the same
Yeah, we don't
time.
have to get into the specific footage I was talking about. There's a lot of
Yeah,
controversy around that. But anyway, we do it's 30 minutes into the show, and
yeah.
30 minutes in,
Wow.
I normally bring some
Yeah.
really great contributors to the UFO community here on X up on stage to ask our guest a question. Is that something you're comfortable with?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Awesome. So we've got my buddy Experience, we've got Alien Protocols, aka Buddy, and WAG up on stage. Let's just go with Experience first, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Peace. What's up, everyone? Rich, what's up, man? Thanks for hopping in and dialogue with us in this crazy topic. I wanted to touch on something you were touching on with the Tic Tac, and
Yeah.
commend you for writing the paper on that. There's a couple of things I wanted to ask. Was your analysis strictly done on the FLIR footage? Did you have any access to any of the radar data? I know obviously a lot of that's classified, but wouldn't it be beneficial for something like that that's already so public to supply people like SEU and other scientists with some more specific radar information to kind of corroborate what you already saw
Brother,
for the
you're
video?
spot on. I mean, that's what we've been asking for. In fact, I want to let you know that when we've been talking and engaging with Arrow, we're finding out that they're only doing that. They're not even doing a full investigation on these cases. And the problem is that they're only like they focus on just the video. And wait a minute, there's more than just the video. There's a whole bunch of people that saw it. And did you get like things like radar stuff? Did you get other kinds of things that you looked at? And the bottom line is that they don't have any of that stuff, right? So even on the we analyzed the Aguadilla, Puerto Rico case and that video clip. And I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that's the one that
Yes.
goes around an airport and something, and then it splits into two, right? So they're claiming that those are basically like not balloons, but they're calling them those Chinese lanterns, sky lanterns. That's what they're saying that they are. And they come up with a concoction about it being, some sort of thing where, and they didn't even bother to get the right weather data to know that it was like in 16-mile-an-hour winds with gusts up to 25, and oh, by the way, if you've ever seen a sky lantern, it's like a little candle at the bottom of it hanging, and it's like a bag that inflates and goes up in the air. Well, how in the hell do you get something to stay lit with that kind of speed, right?
Right.
And so it's ridiculous what they've come up with. And then we've been confronting them back and saying, well, did you bother to look at this? Did you bother? And we're correcting their analysis on that. And we even pointed out, did you even look at our paper, or did you even bother to find out that there was actually radar hits there were 50 radar hits of this object that was out in the water before it actually came in? And no, we didn't even know about that. Well, okay, well, you might want to do that before you actually come out with some sort of a conclusion, right? So you get what I'm going at, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this is, the main thing that I've always been pushing for is to get the exposure at least to the science world with a lot of this stuff. Like, keep the nuclear toys and all your weapon stuff secret. That's fine, but the basic science, if there's something that's happening, like you touched on the time machine thing, which is
Yeah.
something I've been kind of warming up to in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
If you're manipulating gravity, something happens with time, essentially, right? So,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And is that tic tac dropping down? Is it actually manipulating space time? And we don't know. So we don't know if it's manipulating space time when it does that drop, and that's why it doesn't heat up in the atmosphere or something of that nature. But bottom line is that it's it has appearances of being a time kind of thing, especially when you take, like, the case up in Alaska where you had the cargo plane that was coming along, and it was the JAL flight, a Japanese airline flight, and out of nowhere comes this object the size of an aircraft carrier. Well, I mean, it just like became clear. There it is. It's like a cloaking or an uncloaking kind of thing. Well, is that manipulating space time as well? I mean, are we seeing something that is potentially even a fifth dimensional or sixth dimensional object that we believe that there's multiple dimensions? We just don't know. And so that's why a lot of us don't go to the point in declaring alien, because it doesn't have to be alien.
right.
It could be other things. And because you don't know, it's not like you can go there, right? And so until we're focused on getting the understanding of what these objects are, how they maneuver, what they do, how they get through space time or even space, and do what they do without heating up, and what can we learn by applying technology to that. And the more sensor data that we can get, including radar, and everything else, and truly that's going to help us to put that multiple sensors together to be able to come up with a better conclusion, right? So
Absolutely.
That's what we're trying.
Thanks for asking. One last question before I dip out. Is there anything that you guys have your eyes on that's potentially similar science-wise that you've been able to determine that's like anomalous? Any particular case, anything new that you guys are working on putting a paper together for?
Well, we're waiting to be able to get more data. We've been trying to work with Arrow to be able to give, can you give us some stripped down data? You don't have to give me data that's got like GPS locations. You don't have to give
Right.
me, but you can at least give me some information, that's non-classified. You can strip off the classified stuff, like, the names of the people and all that other stuff like that. Just give me the raw information, and then give me access to basically, maybe like something along the lines of, other sensor data to help it. We'll analyze it. We'll give you our understanding of it, because most of us have been doing this for like decades, and we've been around this, so we know how to investigate because we were investigators, and we can give you some, information to be able to help you out. So again, we keep pushing for that, but unless you have somebody that wants to, you'll see like periodically, like Corbell and George and them will put out something on, like a military thing, but it's usually like, with a camera focusing on a screen that's playing it back. That doesn't help us out because that's not original data. And then you don't get much more to be able to go on, right? Like those MQ-9 Reapers that were over in near Kuwait and stuff like that apparently shot at something that was round and spherical. Well, if you gave me more information to go on, I could help you to look at that. But you don't give me anything, I can't help you out. So we are stuck in the sense that we're waiting for better information, and we're going to go out and get it ourselves because we're tired of waiting.
Good deal. Appreciate you answering my question.
No
Great
problem.
questions, Experience. Thanks for coming through.
Yeah, thank you.
Up next, let's go to Alien Protocols, buddy, and then we'll go to WAG.
Thank you, brother, and Josh and Rich. Thank you for so much tenacious and incisive research into this stuff and bringing your skills and talents to the table. So many people in this research and fascinated with this topic crave hard data, stuff that's independently corroborative, multi-sensor data. And now, like you're saying, this stuff is more and more in our hands. There's different efforts, things like spectrometry, where we can get hard, physical, real, interesting data, like they did with the research at the Hessdalen Lights. And it's entering this affordability area now too. I mean, the range of types of sensors you could add, and investigate certain repeating kind of credible, aspects like blue shift and things like that, and the affordability of it, I think it makes it really now really special. But expecting to get from Aero, when you look at historically the government and official kind of research efforts, even the leaders came out later and say they were it was a pretense and it was disingenuous. And so doing what people like you are doing, getting the hard data that's really tough to deny, and multi-sensor data. There's these brothers called the Tedesco brothers in Long Island, and they do great work. If there was two independent groups on the same targets, not too far away from each other, but kind of independent, that brings more kind of evidentiary value even to the table. But something I'd love to see also included, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, is other kind of angles that haven't been pursued as much, but might be equally important. Having psychologists, statisticians, sociologists, giving insights into how things are interpreted, optometrists, even with limitations of the visual spectrum, things like that. Do you think that has a value as well?
Yes. And so to your point, one of the things that I'm proud about SCU is that we have all those disciplines on board. So we have psychologists, we've got medical doctors, we got nuclear physicists, we've got applied optics people, we've got people that are in engineering, we got people that are in programming, and we've got just about every one of those disciplines on board. And the beauty of it is that you've got all of them talking to each other, and that's what you want. You want that cross comparison to what's going on here. Is it there's psychological aspects to these cases and to the witnesses, right? Okay, so what do you do about getting that kind of information, and how can you set that up and stuff like that? It's as much, it's easier for most people to be able to go after like the nuts and bolts kind of thing and looking at the physics, but it's a lot more complex to be able to go and to do the psychology aspects, because now you got to get a hold of people. You got to, there's usually, you have to have well-trained people in either psychology or whatever. And we struggle with that aspect of this. So there's people who claim that they've had abduction experiences and that type of thing, but you haven't got the people, the funds, and whatever else to be able to go after it and, and to do what you want to do with it. So these poor people are being left out in the dark. And the way I look at it is that if I can just focus on the nuts and bolts and get enough that substantiates that legitimacy of the fact that that's there, I am in essence supporting all the people who are saying that they're seeing them and having these experiences, and we need to do that, right? So I'm validating them. And so I'm trying to do what I can do with the types of people that I get, but we encourage all that cross, pollination, if you would. And so it's a good question, though, but that's where we're trying to go.
Thanks, Alien Protocols, and thanks, Rich, for answering. All right, go ahead, Wag.
Yeah.
Hey, Rich, I just want to say thanks for having us out at SCU at 25. I was one of the bald guys sitting at the young kids table, so when we're like close to our 30s or entering our 30s, that was the young kids table. But I really appreciated the 2025 presentation. Just a quick question: do you know when you guys are going to be dropping the Jay Stratton speech on YouTube?
Yeah, so Jay, I don't know if you recall in 2025, Jay was very adamant about us not showing, and maybe you didn't know because you were there, but we were not able to put his face on when we were doing it, and we kept like saying, "Oh, what's that about?" And Jay, can you help us out with understanding what you're looking to do? And so Jay has even, he even threatened to legal action if we did have any kind of like outside of that, any kind of video of him or something like that. Well, anyway, the bottom line is that he allegedly has got a book that he's writing, and he's trying to get it published, and it keeps getting set back. And he was going to allow us to do that drop of that, at least the voice of that and stuff like that, when his book gets published. So to your point, we should be able to do that whenever we hear from him that the book is done, and we can go with it. So we're all hoping that we can get that out there very quick.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, because I've been just basically telling people since, the day after we came back, like, y'all need to wait for that Jay Stratton speech in terms of coherent timeline, just to the point. It's everything short of giving you an org chart for the two different OSAP, ATIP, and all that. But I think that would be, at least, coming from the outside, only being in ufology, post David Grush. I personally have found it confusing, mealy-mouthed. Oh, everybody's giving you this, that. Oh, I can't tell you this, but that was one of the most coherent speeches I've heard. So I really appreciated that. And I hope everybody gets to listen to it someday soon. But the other thing I would say is that I just really appreciate your approach, and it would be, just finding a sense of community at SCU in terms of when you hear people complaining in, the background about what their complaints of ufology are, or, reading comprehension or this or that, or unsystematic ways people are going about it. I loved hearing your angry complaints from your crowd. I loved that group of people. That's definitely the cohort to be in. But one thing I'd point out to you is, or just a curious question. Are you aware of, in the lead up to the 2024 election, Donald Trump 3 different times on the Joe Rogan Experience, Fox News, and a Logan Paul podcast had talked about several 3 or 4 F-22 pilots witnessing a round object going 4 times faster than their aircraft. I guess, have you asked about any of that, or tried to follow up, or thought of ways to probe, I guess, the president or his administration for, give us these gorgeous pilots you're talking about? You know what I mean? And what's the context of you getting briefed on that? And that maybe be a really easy follow-up or homework for people to do in terms of, prodding the president or getting him to move forward on some kind of disclosure.
Yeah, he's obviously a hard one to get a hold of. And number 2, it's like, he'll say things off the cuff. So many of those people will do it off the cuff, and they don't really understand UFOs at all, and they've not spent 2 minutes looking into them, or, and then some people, like, Burchett and everybody else and Burleson have spent more time on it, and they keep getting told, but they're also still at what I call the gullible stage, and they'll believe, and they'll hear something, and they don't follow through with investigating or, doing the critical thinking skill kind of like thing to look into it. And that usually catches them, by the pants, because they end up embarrassing themselves when somebody explains the video as being nothing more than, whatever it is, a balloon or whatever. Anyway, so the point is that you haven't got a lot of education around that in the political world yet on the topic. And, getting to the president is very difficult. I mean, and let me also point out, he'll make statements like, well, I'm going to release all the files, I'm going to release all the wonderful files that are out there and we're going to do that. Right. But it's never put into a written order. And that written order has to be carried out in a written fashion with all the commanders across all the people that are leading the agencies for that to actually happen. And, is he aware of the fact that we already went through this last, 2 years ago, where we already did this records collection stuff? And like I was telling you, we already had done it. And so the Army is going to come back, even if it's asked again, where I was, they're going to say, well, we already gave you that stuff. There's nothing to it, And so and NASA immediately was said, something to the effect that, well, we did the same thing, And so it doesn't really mean anything, because it's not put into any kind of written order, and it's not. And then let me add another problem is that, where do I think all the wonderful hidden stuff is? Well, it's not in the government world. It's it's in the defense contractor world. They've got the goodies, and they're not subject to what the president orders. They're not subject to a Freedom of Information Act request for give me all the radar data from such and such and such. They don't have to do that. They can they blow that off, right? So until we can, are you there?
Yeah.
Until we can actually, and that's what we were trying to go after with the Schumer Act and all that kind of, is to get to the contractor world to be able to give up the goodies, because they're the ones that have it, and that keeps the government from plausible deniability and saying, well, we don't know anything, right? We don't have it. Yeah, it gives them, they can say that legitimately and be, accurate. So we got a problem here. If we want to get to the answers, we got to go to the defense contractors like Lockheed Martin and all these other companies that have these, relationships with the DoD.
Absolutely. And then also, I just, to kind of just dovetail on your point, with some of the earlier discussion of Arrow, I cannot stand the internal contradictions of what they're saying. You'll have Tim Phillips on Event Horizon, or I can't remember if it's Event Horizon or John Michael Goodyear. You have Tim Phillips going on there saying, we have access to everything we need. We have all the clearances we need. We have access to all the data we need. But I was told by a DARPA guy that, DARPA's the one who came and picked up the Tic Tac data, and no, we couldn't find it, and no, we couldn't find the report associated with it. But we have access to everything we need. I'm like, if you have like 13 people as part of the Nimitz incident and radar data was taken, wouldn't you want to see that before you say we have all we need? So it's just, it's like so poorly thought out that if this is a PSYOP, it's poorly thought out. If it's, it's just bad.
But what I want to tell you is that my experience of working in the DoD is that it's mostly, it's more like, I don't want to say it's like incompetence, but it's about ignorance. And people will say something and they're completely ignorant of what they're saying, but they're just making statements, right? And what I see is there's a lot of dysfunction. A dysfunction in the sense that you can't even get two people to agree on anything. But I mean, even in the DoD, and I could be working on some project in my row, and there's two people over in the next row, and they had got no idea what I'm working on at all. None at all, and they don't really care. And it's so, unless I interact with them or something, nobody's ever going to know. So there's all this kind of like not talking, and we're all doing our own little things, and so consequently, I don't know how much these people up there talk to each other, but and then you have people like Kirkpatrick, who is I don't know, he's just off the wall. I mean, I don't have any respect for him at all. And he's more like a debunking agent or something like that, because he really just dismisses everything, including evidence, and he does a poor job with everything that he does. But anyway, that's Kirkpatrick, and he was the former head, and he's doing damage to the Arrow people by opening his mouth. So anyway, that's my take on the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for taking my questions, and thanks for putting on a great event. Fortunately, won't be there at Toronto this year, but if you guys do Alabama again, might be down there with some friends.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Rich, I got so many more questions, but we're approaching 8 o'clock. How are we on time with you?
With me? I can talk for hours.
I like it. Amazing.
But I mean, I'm not held to the hour thing. I can speak longer. When I gave a talk to the University of Alabama to a honors college group, I think I talked for 4 hours. So anyway, I'm on here for a while. You guys want to chat more? They're excellent questions, by the way. So I mean, I don't mind answering them.
Awesome. Yeah, we've got a pretty great group here on this platform. For anybody who's listening to us live, we do post our interviews on YouTube. If you're just joining us now, you can catch the full interview on YouTube at Tesseract Program. And if you're listening to us on YouTube and you want to ask a question to our next guest, tune in live on X Spaces. So that's just a little plug. Hey, Rich, I got a question. So, with SCU, would you guys ever come to DC with that?
What, with the conference?
Yeah, with that conference.
Well, we could. I mean, we've been doing it for a number of years. I've been the one that's been doing all the work in terms of having it down here in Huntsville. This year, I kind of like gave that up a little bit in the context that they wanted to do it somewhere else, and I said, well, and I'll, happy to help somebody else out, and so that's what I'm doing right now. But we had a group up in Toronto that were wanting to do it, and so we said, well, just go ahead and do it this year up in Toronto. But if the challenge is finding somebody that local that we can go to, because they have to help us to find out where the hotels are, where the venue is that we're going to have it, and all that other stuff. And if we can have somebody like local that's going to be able to help us to be able to hold it there, then that's what we really need. I mean, there's a lot of us that can help out. We'll do the marketing and various other kinds of things, and we can hold the conference. I have no problems with. I used to live in the DC area. In fact, I was just up not long ago up there. And so, bottom line is, I'm up there quite often because I got family up in in Maryland, actually in Rockville. But anyway, yeah, we could host it up there.
That's exciting. That's an exciting thought for the future. Hey, listen, there's supposed to be 46 videos released by the Department of War tomorrow. Congress wrote a letter saying, April 14th, we need these videos, and they published the letter online and listed the video names. Not sure if we're gonna get it tomorrow or not. What do you think?
Well, let me also clarify that I've seen like, for example, I mentioned that I have access to the video site for the Air Force, and I looked at the like 30 or 40 videos that they had, and to be honest with you, none of them are any good. I mean, they're just like a little white thing that's out on the screen, and there it is. And so, and then the lowest form of evidence that you can come up with is me just giving you a video without any information that's backing it up. In other words, was it seen by one person? Was it seen by two? What can you tell me anything about where it was located when this thing happened? Were you over a military base and looking at something? I mean, and how? What can you do with a video? I mean, videos don't really tell us much of anything, because and I'll be honest with you, I can pretty much debunk many of the videos that on the History Channel that they want me to look at, because they're just, there's no information, there's nothing at all to go on. And so how do you investigate this video if you don't even know if it was, who the witness was, the type of camera that was used, what time of day was it? Was it over a military base, and maybe this is some experiment that's out there? Or, did it do anything other than just going in a straight line at an airplane speed? Did it make a 90-degree turn? Did it take and do instantaneous acceleration? Did it shoot up in the air? Did it, and so videos to me are just, okay, that's nice, but I'm moving on.
Surface level.
So yeah, I mean, what good is it? It's just, oh, that looks pretty interesting. Yeah, that looked good. That's a funny object. But if you have nothing to it to back it up, then what good is it?
Right. I mean, I kind of feel the same way about whistleblowers.
Yeah, well, exactly.
The same way
if you
with whistleblowers that come with no documents or no evidence, and it's just claims.
Well, let me point out to you. I mean, when you've been, like, for me, like 60 years, I have had people walking up and telling me the wildest stories that you could possibly imagine. What good is that? I saw a UFO last night. Well, good for you. That's great. Is there anything that substantiates that? No. I mean, it meant something to you. And then even if you did see something last night that you're calling a UFO, my experience with MUFON and doing the investigations, we were able to explain away 80% of these things of being misidentifications because people don't look up in the air and don't know what's up in the air. And they misidentify crap like, I've got people that were watching. I had 30 people in Dayton, Ohio that were looking at the planet Venus, and they reported it as an object. I was put into a patrol car in Dayton and escorted out to see them point up in the sky at the planet Venus.
That's amazing.
But yeah, you tell that to a rational person, and bottom line is people misidentify Jupiter. They misidentify, you have the Skylink satellites, the Starlink satellites that are being released. To them, everybody, it's like a UFO. And so, the problem you also run across is that when you do provide any kind of a rational explanation for it, and you've identified it as being an IFO, I did the research. Guess what? To a lot of these people, it's still a UFO, and they ignore and they look at you as being like some sort of like this debunking agent or whatever like that. But yet you've already identified it as being rational or having an explanation. So now you're dealing with human behavior, and human behavior wants to hold on to the fact, well, I saw a UFO.
You know who I do appreciate though, who didn't really come with any evidence, is David Grush.
Oh, I agree. Dave has got credentials and credibility, and he's got clearances to be able to do a lot of different things, and he knows his stuff. Guy knows his stuff, and it's as close to being the truth as you're probably going to get,
Yeah.
And
have you ever got to like have any communications with him?
Well, yeah, he was at my conference.
How'd that go?
So yeah, this is before we all learned about him. He was there and with me in 2022. Yeah, 2022. He was at that conference in Alabama. Yep.
Do you know about Amy Estridge?
Yeah, I know about Amy. I've met her. I've had lunch with her a couple times, and I know about her situation. Yep. Her claims were that she was having, like being hit by, everything from all different kinds of like weapons
DEWs
that were like,
and stuff.
DEWs and stuff like that. And she gave me some, like photographs and stuff like that of like these effects on her hands and a couple other things that she had, there were, if you talk to certain people related to her, they will tell you that she had some mental challenges, but yet when I talked with her, she seemed extremely rational, but she had a lot of anxiety.
I interviewed Mark Sokol like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, Mark, I know Mark as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed her presentation that she gave about the Institute. And she dove into the history of anti-gravity being discovered multiple times in the past 100 years, and then it being black shelved, going all the way back to Thomas Townsend Brown, and then 6 other times that has been discovered. I have it all written down in my notebook. I can't remember at each one off the top of my head, but what's your take on all that?
I can probably help you out with that in a sec, Augustus.
Okay, that'd be great if you could help me out with that. But yeah, Rich, so what do you think about like the secret space program and some of the stuff she was talking about when it comes to, disclosure is going to come out of Huntsville, Alabama, your relationship to Huntsville, Alabama, and the fact that, we've gotten anti-gravity independently discovered 7 times in the past 100 years, and each time it gets black shelved.
Yeah, well, I have constant conversations with Eric Davis on this whole thing, and bottom line is that, that Eric is basically saying that, most of the stuff that was looked at by him and others around the propulsion aspects that were being discussed by Amy and a lot of others didn't hold water. And so, I'm not in a position to be able to judge that, because first off, I'm not an engineer or a physicist or anything like that to be able to do that. And so, but you try to listen to things and talk to credible people that can help you to understand or know what their opinion of it is. And that's what I do. I mean, and so, a lot of the things about anti-gravity and stuff like that, it makes sense that we would be experimenting on it. And I believe that there's continuous experiments that have gone on about it. I don't know how it's achieved, because a lot of the things that even, the T. Townsend Brown and some of the others have been putting forward, when you try to apply them, they don't seem to work. And I don't know, I mean, I struggle with the fact that I'm right here next to where, Saturn V rockets were sitting, and where the Artemis type of, space shuttle or spacecraft and all our shuttles, we're all still, and none of us are building anything that looks like anti-gravity, and we're all building still combustion engines to be able to shoot things, and even our hypersonics things are doing the same principle. Well, you would think after all these years, if there was any success to any of this stuff, that we would at least be seeing something, on the drawing board, something actually working, or something like conceptually that it's understood, and nothing's come about. And is it because we haven't figured out what that is? And I don't know. I don't necessarily always just trust stories that people tell me. Oops,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. I enjoyed listening to the highlight clips of the Eric Davis, Eric Weinstein back and forth
Yeah,
on Jesse Michaels
yeah,
recently. And, right
right.
after that happened, Wag, who just asked you a bunch of questions and then
Yeah,
he went back to the audience, he hosted an X Space here on this platform with Missile Man, and Eric Weinstein joined the space. They had like 1,000 people live, and the big like thing that everybody was circling around was like, why is it that this legacy program is recruiting engineers and not
yeah,
physicists? And then the conversation was like, well, why do you even need physicists for 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 this in the first place? Explain why you need physicists for this in the first place, when clearly the anomalies are operating outside of the physics that you understand and can prove, right? So I just
yeah.
was wondering
Well,
if you could, if you could bounce up, like we're bouncing the ball back and forth here. Like, I don't really have a question. I'm just remembering all this stuff, and it was really great.
yeah. Well, I mean, so here at the base, and also up at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, you have, like, Wright-Patterson. It used to be called the Foreign Technology Division, and now it's called NASIC, the National Air Intelligence Space Center. Whatever. It's basically the people that are doing all of the, if say you get a new kind of aircraft that's an enemy aircraft, they'll take it back and they strip it apart, and they figure out how to re-engineer it and how it's made and how it's put together, and that's what they do. Here in Huntsville, at the Redstone Arsenal, you've got MISIC, the Missile Space Intelligence Center, and so its job is to take missiles. Like, for example, those Scuds and those other things, they get shipped over them, and they tear it apart, look at every bolt that they've got, and they re-engineer it and figure out how it works. So the militaries on every military throughout history, including the Greeks and everything else, did the same thing. They confiscated the technology that was being developed by that culture and figured out how to operate it and use it to their advantage, and that's what they do. Okay, so that's the military world. So if there were a craft of some sort that crashed, or they got parts or debris or whatever like that, they would take it and try to figure it out. But the problem is that if you've got something that's as advanced as we believe that these craft are, then you're dealing with the fact that, it's almost like taking a cell phone and giving it to a Neanderthal and expecting that they would understand what it does or how it does what it does.
Yeah, I've heard that analogy.
And so you might have to have, in the case of something where a theoretical physicist to be able to figure out, how something might operate, how does it do what it does based upon that. So you might have to have some theoretical physicists on board, as well as engineers, and stuff like that, and how it was put together. But so it would behoove you to have that. And I can't say that I know in the legacy program that there weren't any physicists, and I've never seen a roster that was there for me to look at. So,
Right. You still there? Hello?
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Skywatcher? Have you heard of
Do I
that?
know Skywatcher? Yeah, exactly. James Fowler and his team.
Right, yeah. And I spoke with one of the psionic assets out of Skywatcher. Did an interview with him. And basically, I was like asking if Jake Barber was still a part of this legacy program that he claimed that he was or whatever. And he was like, listen, man, I think that there's a new program. The legacy program's retired. And a lot of this stuff that they're studying right now is like the psionic space, right? It's not physics space anymore. It's the psionic space is getting a lot of attention. What are your thoughts on psionics?
Well, first off, I don't know really that much about it. I've heard the some of the things that were being discussed by the Jake Barbers and various other people. I know that they also have this thing called a dog whistle that they use to apparently bring objects.
Yeah, let's talk about that if we can.
Well, I mean, I don't know that much about that either, other than the fact that they're probably emitting some sort of a signal, and that signal is basically being picked up. It might be in a microwave range or something of that nature, and they're sending this up, and it's attracting allegedly these objects to it. I don't know. I don't spend my time investigating Skywatcher or what they're doing. I'm aware that they're doing what they're doing. I'm aware that they're also coming up with interesting, bizarre names for the different kinds of things that they get. I know that they've got a vehicle that's got some like radar kinds of things on it and stuff like that. But I really don't know that much about it, and they're not that open either about it. And so
Yeah.
I'm not, with not having knowledge, I don't want to criticize them if they're doing good, but let's get to something, and let's also make it a little bit more transparent, because that's almost as being as silent and obtrusive as and secretive as we allege that the military is doing. I know that
the Lockheed Martins and the
yeah, well, I mean, exactly. And so, let's be transparent and open if we're going to do research. And oh, by the way, if they have a dog whistle, share that with SCU. We'd like to be able to see it and see if that is done or it would work. And we would be happy to do that experiment as well. So my whole thing about getting all these people together in the beginning of February, from around the world that are doing these kind of things, and it included James Fowler. It also included the Tedesco brothers, and it included a whole bunch of other things. The Sky 360. We also have the UFO DAP and all these other players that were at it. We had 34 presenters that talked about what they're coming up with. And so the bottom line is, that there's a lot of technology that's being done. We need to compare notes with each other. We need to figure out how we're going to be able to get the data over there to the scientists to be able to analyze it and do what they need to do with it, and come up with some sort of cooperative relationship with each other, instead of being separate little, entities that are just hoarding whatever they want to have. And, if I've got 400 scientists eager to look at data, why can't you give some of them some of that data? So that's my point. And that's the message we're trying to get across to these people. And, God bless the Skywatch team and whatever Jake Barber was doing. I never hear about him now, but I don't know anything about that. But let's get it, instead of a legacy program, let's get into a program where we're all cooperating with each other and going after this subject so we can get some answers.
I love the seriousness of your organization. And I think a lot of people who take this topic serious look to you guys for leadership. And I think you're doing a great job in taking on that leadership role.
Thank you.
Just wanted to say that,
Well, yeah,
I'm much more interested in going to the SCU event than I am, contact in the desert and drinking margaritas in a hot tub in the middle of the desert, with everybody dressed up as aliens.
Me too. And the less I can do things that are distracting me from studying UFOs,
Mm-hmm.
the less I want to do anything with them. So, there's too many distractions in this phenomena that are out there. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how many years do I have to hear about Bob Lazar, who's not done anything to be able to prove that that there's anything there? And he talks about an element that's no longer element 115. It's already been found, and all that stuff. I don't even want to deal with them anymore. I mean, I want to focus on what can we learn from UFOs? How can we get some answers to this topic? How can we apply science and rigor to it, and to be able to get some answers for people?
Yeah, it's weird. He doesn't want to testify to Congress, right?
Oh, we would testify to Congress if we were asked, but we've never asked. So
you're talking to people in Congress though, like Burchett and Burleson and Luna and them.
Oh yeah, well, we're talking to all those people, and bottom line is we're trying to get them to understand the full picture and help them to get educated, many of them, and they're not. And we're wanting to be able, at one point we were actually listed on the National Defense Authorization Act when Gillibrand put it together that first year, where we were going to be on, SCU is going to be on a committee to be able to help to look into the subject and help to educate things. And then they took that out. So we were eliminated.
Jeez.
Yep. And
well, the struggle makes you stronger, Rich.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, I got a question I wrote down. Sorry for stuttering. I have a question I wrote down. I'm just gonna read it to you. If the full truth of the phenomenon, whatever it ultimately reveals about non-human intelligence, consciousness, or our place in the cosmos, were disclosed tomorrow, what single piece of advice would you give humanity on how to navigate that new reality without losing our souls in the process?
It's interesting you mentioned the word souls. Let me back up for a second here in that context, because I've always been curious myself. Who would be who would you, if you had some disclosure happen, who would you actually believe? In other words, do you believe that would you believe the president? Well, probably half the population wouldn't believe in it, and then the other would maybe buy into it. How about, do you need the Pope to, was the Pope going to do it from a religious standpoint? And maybe now you'd buy into it. Well, probably some of the religions wouldn't accept what the Pope says. So the bottom line is, who is the trusted persons that you would expect to get that kind of statement from, that you would actually believe, since most everybody doesn't believe, there's a good part doesn't believe that UFOs are real, or that even wants to accept the fact that, they're, by the way, they're demonic. Didn't you know that?
Yeah, according to J.D. Vance, right?
And so, and then to what what would happen with that, and so, well, a good part of the population wouldn't accept it. They wouldn't believe it. Okay, well, then there's not going to be too much happening there. Would you then expect that the government's going to start now funding, further research? And you would hope that that would be the case. Do you think you're going to get every politician to go along with that? Probably not. You'll have pushback. Would every country on the planet necessarily believe that? And the answer is likely no. There's a lot of them that think that what we would be saying would be total. So the likelihood of getting disclosure of anywhere at all is, in my view, it's really not going to happen. And I'll be honest with you, even if it did, I don't think it's going to have a whole lot of ramifications to it. I thought, for me, that the fact that the government, our government, finally said that UFOs are real was kind of a disclosure, and I was glad to hear that, because and during my earlier days with Project Blue Book, they wouldn't have even gone that far, and so the fact that they say UFOs are real, that's okay, that's good, that's a good step. But are they going to say that that now the government actually knows about all these things, and they put so little money into it and researching it and investigating it, and they do a poor job with that? And would they come up with that conclusion? I don't think that that's going to really pretty much ever happen in my lifetime. I would be surprised, unless the objects themselves chose to say, hi, I'm going to come down and land, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And then you might be able to get somewhere with it. But do I expect the day the Earth stood still, where you're going to have an object land in the White House, and that's going to happen? We have to rely on them to do that. And they haven't shown any willingness. I can't say they, because they haven't any willingness to do that. But it's a good question you've asked. But it's one of those ones that I pondered for a very long time, and I just can't see my way out of it. And I mean, I've been waiting for 62 years for some sort of disclosure. I expected that to happen with the Condon report back in the early days, and that didn't even happen. And so, do I believe that disclosure? Nah. Do I even care? Nah. At this point.
I like it. Hey, do you believe in God?
Oh, that reminds me. I was going to point to you. Yes, I do. And to your point. So one of the things that over the past, number one, I'm married to a woman who's actually had an NDE. So I've talked with her about her NDE that she had and everything else. And, that got me curious, and I started listening to other people's testimonies about that. And I probably now have listened to easily over 300 testimonies about NDEs. And, that starts to get you into that question about, interdimension, if you would, that there's other potential dimensions out there. And, even some of the people in NDEs describe the fact that they see other worlds with aliens and stuff like that. So the question comes up then, are we experiencing something from that particular dimension that is coming into our frame of reference? And who's to say? I don't know. I really don't know. It's what you don't know. But yet near-death experience kinds of events where you've got people describing some incredibly similar and common, there's common elements to almost all these stories, that tells you that there's way more to the life beyond what we think of in terms of our reality. So for me, it's one of those things where I'm extremely open to hearing that. And I'm also open to the idea that potentially you might have something from that particular dimension, if you would, if that it's a dimension that we go to after we die, that is able to enter into this dimension for a period of time.
Wow, that's amazing. Hey, we got one more question from an audience member, member of the community, Nathaniel Hanks. Hey, Nathaniel.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, thank you. I was interested in the nuts and bolts, so to speak, and I wondered what might be your furthest understanding of, given that there's many different craft, there might be different modes of propulsion, but take one, say a tic tac, a saucer. I
Yep.
like a saucer.
Yep.
Do you have an understanding of the what I would wonder what your current understanding is, and also if you follow people like Tim Ventura with the APEC Alternative Propulsion Conference and
Yep.
some of the latest. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been a guest on APEC, and I'm, of course, Tim Ventura and stuff like that. He comes to the conferences and stuff like that all the time. So I've known him for years. Let me point out to you that just this whole phenomenon is just one of those things that's just curious as hell to me. But your mind goes crazy trying to figure out how these things work and stuff like that, and you look at the shapes that they've been, the sizes that they've been, and they vary. An object the size of a grapefruit has been seen, and it's doing the same kind of maneuvering kind of capabilities that the larger craft does. It can hover, it can shoot off, and it can shoot off at incredible rates of speed. It doesn't leave any kind of a blast behind it. It's like you could be standing there. If we have an aircraft taking off, you got all that wind and everything else. You got the pushback from that. With these objects, there's nothing like that, and they tend to be silent most of the time. And is it because that they're silent, to the hearing range? Is it because that you'd hear something in the below hearing range or above hearing range of humans? And so if we have sensors to be able to do that, we might be able to determine that they are making noises. And so we need to be able to listen with sensors to be able to hear that, right? And so listen acoustically. But the objects can be almost any size and do the same kinds of things. They've been seen throughout history that, in dumbbells, cubes within spheres, all kinds of shapes and sizes and triangles and you name it. I mean, they've been there. And these have a very similar kind of capability in terms of maneuvering and doing things in a very similar way. And then you sit there and say, well, is there one, is this one place that's coming to visit us? Is it multiple places? Are multiple hypotheses involved? Is it time travelers as well as interdimensional things? And maybe we're getting them all, but they all have a very similar capability in terms of moving around the atmosphere, not heating up and doing all kinds of things like that. So then you say, is this from one source? And so, to your point, we do know that, like, when we've looked at shapes, for example, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but the flying saucer, or the disc shapes, had, when it hovered, it had what they call like a falling leaf kind of an effect, where it just rocked back and forth slowly. Whereas when you're looking at triangular shaped objects, now they seemingly don't have a falling leaf kind of an effect, but they have a perfectly stationary and can rotate around and then shoot off, but there's no wobbling, if you would. And so we don't see the wobble anymore. It used to be that the disc-shaped objects also would lead to, for example, a vehicle, like in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where the truck, for example, lost or went dead, and then it comes back on, and stuff like that. We don't see that anymore. Is that because the objects changed or whatever that they had? Or is it because our transmissions and things changed in our cars, and we don't have that same kind of thing anymore? And it's more likely a combination of both. But, the bottom line is you still have objects leaving electromagnetic effects sometimes when they're around equipment. So,
I take that was a pretty good overview as far as observables, and I might add in a warp drive observable, or a warping effect that's been recently added. I think pretty empirically done, but I would suppose that perhaps rotating magnetic fields, toroidal field geometries, and plasma are connected with all of them throughout. that the underlying connection seems to be breakthroughs in ball lightning or plasmoid discoveries in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. That could have, had to generations of craft, say gas, then a nuclear engine, then something more like a traditional fusion. And so it seems to me that the Occam's razor, just in a conversation on UAP and UFO, it gets lumped in with extraterrestrial stuff, but I don't think there's any reason in an argument why it needs to start there. And so I'm leaving that out as completely man-made, understood technology in a dark world that I believe you acknowledged.
Yeah. No, I very much believe that we have had this dark world knowledge for a long time. And in fact, we would have attempted to do some of these things we would hopefully have learned from any kind of crash. If you think Roswell was collected and picked up, then you would have had how many years of kind of like research to figure out something about it, and so and then the question is, throughout history there's been other crashes. So do other countries also are in the race with this, and so maybe the Chinese, and you always have to question whether it's a breakthrough civilization that are, in other words, some part of the world has figured out how these things operate and are operating them, and so that's why
that's the isolated humans hypothesis. I quite like, because I think that human capital could fit in for that. The crashes and Roswell could have been just Operation Lusty, Operation Paperclips advancements continued in secrecy. It wasn't reported until 1977 popularly. So
So again, we just don't know what we don't know, and if you can't find any records to substantiate or whatever like that, then it becomes one of these things where it becomes left to conspiracy theory or something of that nature, and it's treated as such. So the bottom line is that if there is this advanced research going on, and have we figured it out, what would we do with that? Well, I'll tell you this much: we would probably not want to announce the fact to the Chinese and Russians that we have something like this, and we would be flying it around and use the UFO as a means of being a distraction or a whatever from the fact that we've learned something. And so I'm saying that you're going to use the UFO to your advantage, and that's what they did even at Nellis, and some Area 51 things that they would have otherworldly kind of like designs and things like that, and people would report them as you, and that was to their advantage, because it get blown off,
Yeah, and with understanding contractors, I think a lot of people have a moral filter that they put on, and we wouldn't fly by our boys in the sky like that and scare them unless we were testing it and we're amoral about it, and we might deploy a weapon. I think that Colaris makes more sense as a new generation ahead of the Phoenix light craft, for the latest of what we could have done with a saucer and lasers projected out of it. And if you look at it, one of the things that I hold to the human hypothesis is that if it is something so far advanced, we shouldn't have any idea about it. We shouldn't also have patents for lenticular craft or toroidal saucers or counter-rotating mechanisms or fusion reactors at the same time. It should be beyond us. And then we catch up. But every step of the way, it seems that when there's a laser used, we'd had lasers for 20 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you.
I'm with you. I just think that, overall that, the black world or the dark world or whatever you want to call it has been out there as way more advanced than what we think that it is. And I think that there's hypothetically, you could use the UFO subject as a way of just getting by with doing, hidden in plain sight, I guess, if you would.
Well, this is my first hearing of you. I appreciate your time. And if there's a way I could get involved, I followed you. I see that you have a protected thing, but I'll maybe look into the organization as just a independent researcher. I would like to, see what can be done on this to learn it. But anyway, thanks. And thanks, Augustus.
Yeah, sure thing, Nathaniel. Rich has got an amazing organization, SCU. Do you want to speak to it?
Good.
Or should I?
Yeah, let me do that if you don't mind. ExploreSCU.org is the website. We're also on all the other social media platforms as well. We publish our papers. We have a newsletter we put up there as well. I encourage people to look at that. The paper we talked about from Aguadilla, the Nimitz case. Every time we do a paper, it gets published up there, and you can go and read it yourselves. And we're trying to be as transparent and open as we possibly can, and yet still get things published into journals and stuff. So we're up there. You can go to the contact page. You can contact me, or even through that, but at the same time, we're publishing our information on our right now on our July 24th to the 26th Toronto conference that we're going to be having. And so there's a registration link for that for you to be able to go there. But again, if you look at, we've also got a YouTube channel. You can watch all of our previous, our conferences where we published and had Lou Elizondo. We've had, Gallaudet. We've had, all the people that you probably have heard of talking at our conference and doing incredible scientific kinds of papers. So, I mean, it's incredible stuff. And I just encourage you to go up to exploresau.org and take a look at yourself and draw your own conclusions. But we're very open. And we're open to be able, you can be a member. I mean, we have a community kind of a membership, if you would. If you just want to be hanging out there and listening to and having conversations with a few people, you can do that. Or if you really want to get engaged, we have projects you can get into and help us out with our projects that we're doing, where we're actually doing studies and research on different topics. We're looking at physical effects in the atmosphere that we can get from cases. We also looked at, UFOs and nukes and the relationship to the nuclear locations. And we're on our 4th paper there. That's pretty incredible. And then we've got other things. We looked at drones, drone reports. There's a lot of drone reports where they're actually not drones, but they're UFOs. And people are getting them mixed up, and so we're looking at that. And so, again, there's a whole lot of that kind of thing going on. And we've got some excellent papers and excellent people on board.
Amazing. Hey, we've got one more guest question, and then
Yep.
I'm going to round it off with just some
Yep.
closing comments. So go ahead, Elections.
Hey, Augustus, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Rich, what a nice surprise to see you. Good gracious. Just was curious, since you're good friends with Amy, I was just curious what your thoughts or observations might be on the number of people, scientists, researchers that are associated with plasma physics and next generation energy research that have gone missing. I don't need to list those names to you, but I was just curious if you had anything to offer on that. And thank you for being here.
Great question.
Yeah, thank you. It's one of those things where it's like, so somebody connects McCaslin with the fact that, well, at one point when he was out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and oh, by the way, he was the one that got together with Tom DeLonge and basically, led to more like the UFO doors opening up and stuff like that. And then, well, we heard about that one. Then the news media hears about it. Well, there's another one that was something similar. And it starts getting connected into this overall long list of many others that have had deaths or, that have, basically either been killed or whatever like that. And so, I'm sitting back and watching that. I'm just, I'm aware of it. I don't know what to make of it yet. I mean, I look at these as all kind of like separate incidents. And, when I go over to where I worked at basically over here at the base, I'm sure that the vast majority of those people are engineers and scientists and various other things that I could probably find, X number of people who have died strangely or something like that. And want to connect those and chain them together to create a mystery, right? So there's a part of me that looks at this as a mystery as opposed to a, like, let's get rid of and not all of them were into UFOs either. I mean, so for example, the female that waved and, disappeared and stuff like that, she was looking at, some rather advanced metals and things like that doing that were, I believe, that are still kind of being used and looked into. And so she had, some very advanced research. I am concerned about the fact that we're losing scientists. I'm always going to be concerned about that. But I guess I'm not yet seeing that everyone wants to connect it to UFOs, that there's something related to UFOs, because not all of them are UFOs, related people. But they're well-respected scientists in their own right. And I'm more concerned about the people and the families that are experiencing this. And I just don't know yet to connect the dots, and I don't think that anybody has done the connecting the dots, meaning that they, no, there's one source of all these deaths, if you would. Um, I'm hoping that McCaslin took a gun with him. I'm hoping that he just didn't, I know that he had some sort of like issues, and I hope that he just didn't go and off himself. That would be very hard for the family to deal with and everything else. And then there was the one guy that was just sitting out on his front porch, I guess, or something like that, and they got shot and killed. And they're all living in that part of the world where there's a lot of danger too, and strange things with MS-13 or something like that going on. So I'm just trying to be honest with you. I don't really know that much, and I don't think that anybody really knows a whole lot about it yet. But
Right.
it's a concern, and I'm sad to see that we're having this loss of all this talent, if you would.
I understand you're being circumspect. That makes sense.
Yeah.
One other thing, though, that I think needs to be added into this mix, and all those people are around the issue, and it's all of one piece, as you know. But if you also add in all the astrophysicists that have had strange demises, it makes you scratch your head pretty hard.
It does. And, I hate to say it, but we do have a lot of enemies, and I would say that we have internal enemies, or enemies that are maybe from the outside that are on the inside of the United States, if you would. And we just don't know if there's something like that. Could this be a Russian operation? Could this be a Chinese operation? Could this be something? And I don't think that we've had enough evidence to make that connection. What bothers me is that we don't have evidence to be able to do better than what we're doing. But I'm hoping that, if they keep investigating long enough, that they'll get some better answers. But if it is, if it's a conspiracy to do that, again, we've got to have agencies that are actually doing that level of investigation. And I'm not sure I'll be honest with you, with Doge has basically killed off a lot of different organizations, and they were dysfunctional before, but they're even more dysfunctional now. And the question is, can they operate and do their missions now? And I don't know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Hey guys, so we're now an hour and 40 minutes into the interview. I'm gonna have to wrap it up. I've got some family responsibilities I need to address and pay attention to. So Rich, thank you so much for your time tonight. I hope that you enjoyed the interview as much as I did, as much as the community here on UFO X did. And I really hope that we can get you back for a part 2, where I can dedicate more hours to peeling back the layers of this onion, right? So keep doing what you're doing, Rich. I would love to continue communications in the back channel with you through Josh. Josh, thank you so much for hooking this up.
Yeah, thank you, Josh.
Yeah, welcome, Justice, and good to connect with you again, Rich.
Yeah,
it's good to connect with you again too, Josh.
I would love to offer any kind of resources or services I can to SCU, and maybe we could get you guys to come out to DC. So anyway, guys, you can watch this full thing live on YouTube later, and if you're listening on YouTube, make sure you give me a follow, Augustus Pallante, follow Josh Freeman, follow Rich Hoffman, and tune in live on X Spaces for the recordings of these podcasts. So, Rich, thanks again for your time tonight, man. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. And thank you for having me. And thanks for all the great questions.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, stay free, stay blessed. Catch you on the flip flop.